show Something You Should Know back in the 80s. The 80s. I had no idea what I was doing. Up until that point, my career had basically been that of a disc jockey. I was a rock and roll disc jockey here in town. But I had come up with this idea to do a daily syndicated feature that used an interview with an expert that I would syndicate to radio stations around the country that would give people interesting and useful information they could actually use in their lives. That was the goal. That was the concept. And it turned out that people liked it. Stations started signing up. And I agreed to do a year's worth of shows in the 80s. That's 260 shows. 5 shows a week times 52 weeks. I had to find 260 people to interview. And I had no idea where I would find them. But I agreed to do it because I agreed to do it, because I thought it was a good idea. So I started looking for people to interview. And this is the 80s. There's no internet. All I have is my phone, a newspaper, the library, and that was it. So the first interview I set up was with a guy. This is the first interview I did. It was with a guy who at the time was like the leading expert in the country on things like autographs, forgeries, handwriting, forged documents, that kind of thing. And we were going to do an interview about autographs, because I thought everybody has gotten an autograph. Always wondered if it might be worth something. That would be a good interview. So, get ready to do my very first of 260 interviews. I sit down and I say to the guy, and I've never done an interview. I've never interviewed anybody in my life. And I say to this guy, he's kind of a little cranky old guy, and I said, so, Charles, tell me what it is exactly that you do. And there's this silence. I said, what the hell kind of question is that? You asked me on your show, and you don't even know what it is I do? What the hell's going on here? And I got flustered, and I fumbled through the interview, but it was a train wreck. The whole interview was a train wreck. And after it was over, I sat there thinking, okay, I've got to come up with 259 more of them. I don't even know how to do that, and even if I did, what if they're all like this guy? And fortunately for me, my wife at the time, she was my wife at the time, and at that time, she was working for a television show back in the 80s called Our Magazine with Barry Collins, if you remember that show. And I told her what happened, and she said, well, you know, on Our Magazine, on a TV show, we don't like hunt people down in the newspaper and call them up and beg them to do an interview and then have them bark at us. And we primarily, on Our Magazine, we interview authors. And they have publicists, and they'll actually call you and ask you to interview their clients. Well, I never heard of this. This was about the best idea I had ever heard. So I got the list of book publicists, people like Irwin, and I started calling people and setting up interviews. And all of a sudden, life got really easy. But I remember standing there thinking, looking into the future, saying, how in the world am I ever going to get 260 people to interview? And I stand here tonight, 34 years later, looking back on 7,000 interviews. Almost all of them set up by book publicists. Book publicists and authors have been the fuel for my career. They have allowed me to do something I absolutely love, make a decent living, and get to talk and interview some of the most fascinating and brilliant people in the world. And for that, I am eternally, eternally grateful. So, Irwin's asked me tonight to talk to you about changes in the industry. And what I'd like to talk about is the changes that directly impact how we work together. Producers, publicists, and authors. And fundamentally, there is no real change. I mean, the deal is, we need guests. If you're a publicist, you provide guests. Or if you're an author, you are a guest. You come on, give us great content, and in exchange, you get to promote your book, your brand, and your expertise. That's our deal. It's always been our deal. It still is our deal. That is our arrangement. Okay? So, that hasn't changed, but what has changed are the tactics and the strategies that I see publicists and authors starting to use, and that I recommend that authors and publicists start to use, and that's what I would like to talk about, because I think these changes help to move the needle, to help make media appearances better, more effective, and help to grow your brand and sell your books. And let me first start by talking about the pitch, because that's what I get asked most. What is the best way to pitch a guest? And I don't think there's an answer to that question, because to my way of thinking, the pitch, the how do you present, prepare, package a client to be a guest, an interview-worthy guest, is probably the most challenging and creative job a publicist has. And I would never presume to say there is one way to do that. I get a lot of pitches. And I don't get many bad pitches. Most of the pitches I get are pretty good. The change I've seen is that I don't normally get the old school for immediate release, Dateline New York, Simon & Schuster announces the publication of their new book. Those kind of pitches are gone. Now it's very brief. Here's who I've got. Here's who he or she talks. Here's what he or she talks about. And if you're interested, here's more information. And that works pretty well. The big change in the pitch, the whole pitch concept that I've seen, is in the use of the telephone. Several years ago, my phone rang all day long with publicists calling me saying, I'm pitching you a guest, and I've got a guest who's perfect for you. Everything today is email. Everything is email, which is fine, but emails are easy to forget, easy to delete, easy to ignore, and easy to misunderstand. And I probably get 1/10 of the calls I used to get, because everybody's emailing me. And even the follow-ups are email. Well, if I didn't respond to the email, I'm probably not going to respond to the follow-up email. So, if I were doing publicity, I'd get back on the phone. Because phone calls are hard to ignore, and the fact that since so few people are actually making phone calls, those phone calls are so much more impactful. I'll give you an answer to a phone call. So I would recommend that. Now, on to the interview process itself. Let me first talk about a premise. I want to give you a premise that many people in our industry don't talk about. But when I coach people, I don't coach a lot of people, but I do a handful of coaching every year. And this is one of the first things I say to every person who's going to do media interviews. When you're on the radio, when you're being interviewed on the radio, everyone listening to you on the radio, is also doing something else. Everybody is also doing something else. They're driving their car, they're getting their kids ready for school, they're getting ready for work, they're exercising, whatever it is they're doing. Nobody's sitting in a room with the shades closed and lights off listening to the radio. And even if they were, their mind would be wandering. We talk about the radio audience, like we talk about a television audience or a theater audience or a movie audience. But all of those things have that visual component that captures people's total attention. Radio cannot and does not do that. So, what does that mean? Hold that thought for a moment. I'll get back to that. But everybody listening to you on the radio is also doing something else. Now, for years, there's been this school of thought. I run into it all the time with authors. And that school of thought is you have to be very careful about what you say. You don't want to say too much. You don't want to give away your secret sauce, because if you say everything in an interview, then people won't buy your book. That theory has been blown out of the water so many times, but there are still so many authors who believe it. And let me tell you why that theory doesn't work. We live in the Google age. People expect information for free. And if people think you're withholding information to lure them to buy your book, they will resent it and they'll never buy it. You have to give out all the best stuff you have. And the way we really know this is through some of the great internet marketers. I don't know if you know these guys, but some of the more aggressive, successful internet marketers like Brendan Burchard, Jeff Walker, Evan Pagan. I'll take Brendan Burchard for it. He has his thing called the Experts Academy, and a couple of times a year, he does his Experts Academy promotion, where he tries to get people to buy his $2,000 Experts Academy program. And in order to get the program, you first have to watch a series of videos that collectively are well over an hour, and he tells you everything. He tells you everything that's in the Experts Academy. Now, what you don't get, that when you buy the Experts Academy and you get the box in the mail, what you don't get is the DVDs and the password-protected website and the webinars and everything else. But he tells you everything in those free videos that he gives you in advance of offering the thing for sale. And I asked him, so why do you do that? Why do you give away everything? And he said, because this is how people really think. If the free stuff is this good, imagine how good the paid stuff is. That's how people listen to the radio. If you're really good in an interview, imagine how good the book is. If you withhold information, people don't like that. The second thing, the second change I want to talk about is this dance we do. Everybody's been told by producers and by your publicist, don't get too hypey about your book, don't over-promote your book, don't turn the interview into a commercial. Be careful about how you promote your book. Well, but you want to promote your book. That's why you're here, that's why you're doing the interview. Well, the problem is that promoting a book on the radio, as good as it can be, most people, remember my premise earlier, most people, or not most people, everybody listening to you on the radio is doing something else. They're not listening as intently as you think they are. So, they're not going to go, it's very unlikely that somebody will go from listening to you on the radio to shelling out $25 for your book. It's a big leap that most people will not take. A few people will, most people won't. It's a big, big leap. Again, taking a page from the internet marketing playbook, what people will do, and what the big internet marketers do, is give something away for free. So I'm not suggesting that you don't promote your book, because you've got to promote your book, because if you're an author, that's magic. People love authors. Authors are credible. But if you were to say to the host, well, Bob, I have something for your listeners if they go to my website for free, and it's a self-assessment test, it's a free webinar, it's a free video, it's a chapter of my book, it's something free that has real perceived value. You'll get a lot more people willing to do that than will ever buy your book from an interview. Here are two statistics that we know from the Radio Advertising Bureau. And one is that, and this is important, 25% of all people listening to the radio at any given time are also online. They have a computer in front of them, and they have the ability to go online. 25%. 22% of people surveyed said that the radio has prompted them to stop what they were doing and go online and find out more information. Radio is really good at driving web traffic. It is better at driving web traffic than it is selling books. If you can drive people to your website and give them a reason to go and give them something for free, now you've captured their name, their email address, and you can market to them forever in a very deliberate and aggressive way. But if you just try to sell them your book on an interview, even if they buy your book, they go to Amazon and they buy your book, you'll never know about it. You'll never capture their name. You'll never be able to sell them anything else. So drive them to your website. That is a much better way to capture people, grow your list, and market to them. Remember, people are not listening to you on the radio as intently as you think they are. And the last thing I want to say, the last point I want to make, I need to tell a quick story first. I had a lady on my show several years ago who had a book and had a business that helped people get out of credit card debt. And I interviewed her, and the show ran a week or so later, and she called me a few days later, and she said, my phone's ringing off the hook. I don't know, how do we do this every day? This is incredible. And I got to thinking, well, I mean, people have told me that being a guest on Something You Should Know sells books, but I've never before or since had anybody tell me that they got hundreds and hundreds of phone calls from one appearance, and she did. And the reason, well, there were a couple of reasons that she did. One is her persona. When she was on the radio, she had this kind of, she had this enthusiasm that was hard to describe. She was very maternal. She wanted to put her arms around you and make it all better, mommy, kind of thing. But more importantly, what she had was a message that was urgent. The people she was appealing to were people who were in trouble, who had a problem, who needed help. They were getting collection calls. They were using one credit card to pay another. Her audience was in urgent need of help. And that is why her phone rang off the hook. And it occurred to me, when you listen to the radio, when you listen to interviews on the radio, a lot of them aren't that urgent. They're interesting, good to know, yeah, it's kind of nice, yeah, it's okay. But if you can somehow frame your topic and move it down the scale of urgency, give people a reason to act, give people something to do now, because if they don't, something bad will happen, then you're much more likely to get people to buy your book, go to your website, do whatever it is you want them to do, rather than just give them something interesting that's nice to know. So, I actually spend time, people make fun of me for this, but I actually spend time watching people listen to the radio. It's kind of like watching paint dry. And I have seen it over and over again, that when people listen to the radio, they are so distracted. They are so doing something else. And I want to get back to what that means to you. That you, while people are distracted and doing something else, you as the guest on the radio, or the host, and you need to be able to grab people and bring them back to listen to you, so that it just doesn't sound like droning on and on and on and on. You need to grab people by the ears and say, hey, listen to me. Now, you know who's really good at this as a host is John on KABC. He does this incredibly well, but not all hosts do this. And so as a guest, one of the things that I recommend to people I coach, and that I recommend to anybody that asks, not that many people ask, is that you need to do what I call drop little verbal bombs in your interviews. And I want to give you a couple of quick examples, and then I'll be done. I tell people that to grab people's attention and pull them back to listen to you, you need to have these declarative statements that you can later explain that just punch people right in the face and get them to listen. And here's a few that we've come up with over the years. This pediatrician that I interviewed said, every boy, when he reaches the age of 10, will become a disappointment to his mother. I mean, that grabs your attention. You will never change a habit unless there is a reward at the end. Never, ever, ever. Science has no explanation for the concept of now. The moment as you experience it right now and then goes away cannot be quantified or defined. If you're going to let your kids see you fight with your spouse, you better let them see you make up or you're a total idiot. These are the kind of things that get people to go, what did he say? And it pulls them back. It pulls them right back. So those are the changes. Those are the things that I see happening. Give away your best ideas. Don't hold anything back. Use radio to drive people to your website and capture their information so you can market them forever or until they opt out of your list. Make your topic as urgent as it can be and get people to act. And because people are not listening as intently as you think they are, drop some little verbal bombs that pull their attention back to what you have to say. That's it. Thank you, and thank you for your work.